It's time for today's Face-Off on Fox Soul. Challengers Quan LX and Big Angry Adams ready to go blow by blow on those hot topics. Face-Off on Fox Soul starts right now.
There are kids being bullied. There are kids being targeted. And there are kids who are terrified that their parents, U.S. citizen kids, terrified today that their parents are going to be taken away, that they're going to go home and the home is going to be empty. And so that is what has been unleashed on America.
And we don't know all the details here about what happened. We don't even know her parents' immigration status, but that's it's almost like beside the point. I mean,
at this point, will her mom go on TV and say, yes, I am undocumented, knowing what's happening to people when they go on TV and then they get picked up by ICE? But yeah, this is still under investigation. It's being investigated by the school police. And what the mom told CNN is that the girl committed suicide after she was being relentlessly bullied and taunted at school about the family's immigration status.
In this round, here's Quan LX.
Charles, that was a story about an 11-year-old Hispanic young lady in Texas, 11-year-old child who parents say she committed suicide because she was consistently being bullied about her family's immigration status, and that students at the school that she attended was going to call ICE and have her parents deported. And out of fear, anxiety, and stress, that obviously forced this young child to do something to herself that is 10 times worse than what ICE could ever do, has cost this young woman her life, this young child her life of being bullied. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I have to admit, when you listen to the conversations that I've eavesdropped on, I have to be honest, there's a lot of bullying going on with these young children in elementary school now like never before. Charles, do you know this is not the first case where some elementary child age student has committed suicide because of bullying at school? There have been boys and little girls who've hung themselves and committed suicide because they're being bullied at school. What is happening in school now is the kids have such access to social media. These young elementary age children are using social media to really terrorize other students. And I would just hope and pray that at some point, when is it going to be a wake-up call to us as a nation that social media and young age children is a combination for disaster? Because that's the vehicle they're using to bully other kids who committing these heinous acts against themselves. I don't know all the answers, but I absolutely want to be a part of whatever the solution is that helps create a safer environment for our children at school. Nobody wants to really talk about, Charles, how dangerous the public school system has become at every level in America. For children, students, teachers, administrators, it's like everybody is in an institution, quote unquote, of academic learning, growth, and development, but it's nothing more than an institution of fear. And most of them now look like little young fight clubs and preparing you for the penitentiary system and the jail system. When you look at the videos that these kids are posting of student activity against each other and teachers, it's sad, Charles.
Well, you know, Cornell, I actually agree with a lot that you had to say about this topic. I was a bit horrified by the CNN panel's comments, because basically the comment was, we don't care if it's true that she took her own life because of the Trump administration's immigration policies. We want to focus this entire conversation on the Trump administration's immigration policies and blame that for the student's death. There has been some issue taken between the school district and the mother's public comments, and it does sound like it goes a lot deeper than just the, oh, Trump caused her death by enforcing immigration law, which is the prevailing national and social media narrative. Apparently 5 years ago, her parents were divorced, and the child struggled greatly with that. Apparently she was, because of her coping skills issues, she was in counseling twice a week at school, right? And the mother claimed she had no knowledge, as publicly claimed, and the school responded with, we have a signed form from you, right? You talked about the parents saying that. I don't think we've heard any public statement from the father. We've just, the mother has made a number of statements. So there was clearly some psychological issues going on, that she was receiving a higher rate of counseling than most any other students typically receive. And at with possibly her mother's permission. But whether it was this immigration policy bullying, whether it was just generalized bullying, and the school district is saying we had 0 reports. We have no reports of bullying, and in fact, we were aware that she was having these coping issues, and we proactively acted to get her help, right, for apparently some time, right? But none of it matters when the truth is exactly what you were saying, right? That kids are getting bullied in schools. And since the Department of Education policy changes with the first Obama administration, there has been this great dialing back of consequence for students for bullying. And there has been this model of push them through, right? The way we want kids in school. We'll threaten to the rest of the parents if they come to school. Remember, we had that whole era from 2001 to 2016 or 17, where parents were actually getting arrested for kids not going to school. Why did they want those kids there? Because they couldn't get their federal tax dollars and their state tax dollars unless they had the attendance. But while we have them there, we're not going to educate them. We're not, I mean, if you look at the education, we spend more on student education in America than any other country, and yet we're doing a horrible job. And who are we doing the worst job for? Young black Americans.
Innocently poor
right?
children.
And so we have rule-following, law-abiding, intelligent children of color who are terrified to evidence their intelligence at school. They are terrified to stand up and say, hey, I want to learn more about STEM or science or whatever, right? Where it is push them through philosophy that has now infected colleges, right? Where we have all these nonsense degrees that prepare people for no jobs or no
and that nobody's paying for.
People can borrow money.
And that nobody in the workforce is paying for.
And
you're graduating from school with degrees such as interior design. Who in the hell is paying for that?
Here's the thing.
Graduating
interior design is at least a profession. When
Charles,
it is about
how many companies are lined up to pay a kid for interior design degree?
On allies,
graduating with a degree in phys ed. Come on, Charles.
Well,
you go into debt.
Phys ed leads to
but you go into debt by hundreds of thousands of dollars for a phys ed degree.
You're staying far away from the woke degrees that are actually nonsense. I wonder why, Quanell.
But wait a minute. Go ahead and mention them. They pathetic.
Why not encourage kids? My kids, what I told them, you got to get a degree that leads to a job or I'm not paying for it.
That makes sense.
That's how I got a doctor or a lawyer. That's how you got a lawyer.
But I would say this.
Telling them to get.
But I would say this, ladies and gentlemen, don't go into debt for these degrees like you used to, because AI is about to take over a lot of that.
But more importantly, let's get back to
AI for to destroy that.
Let me tell everyone, if your kid is being bullied and they're being tortured and the school's not doing anything, because there's so many damn schools that don't do anything.
That's not doing it.
Love your kids enough to homeschool them. Love your kids enough. When I first put my kids in private school,
I never would have said that
couldn't afford it
until now. I never would have said that until
way
now,
back
man.
then. I made my own money, but I said they're
when you watch
more
them videos,
important than me having a new car.
When you watch them videos, is it safe sending your child to a school system in America today?
The whole thing
is it really safe?
You have to protect your kid, and that has to be your priority as a parent.
What drives me crazy, Greg Abbott is calling his private school voucher scam school choice, but we already have school choice in Texas. A parent can choose to send their child to their neighborhood school, a public charter school, a magnet school, an early college high school, or any number of academies and career and technical schools. And if your school is struggling academically, we already have a program that allows a student to transfer to a higher performing school. I'm all for even more options, but what I'm not for is giving away our precious taxpayer dollars to unaccountable private schools that can discriminate against our students. Greg Abbott is saying private school vouchers create competition between public and private schools. I like competition, but only if it's fair.
In this round, here's Charles Big Angry Adams.
All right, we called an audible on this and got a new story, which is that's a state representative from suburban Austin, Texas, Tellurico, talking about the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, who is pushing just this legislative session a voucher system. It's been pushed and failed before, that would allow parents to take their tax dollars that they're paying. You know, we have very high property taxes to pay for school, public education in Texas. Take those tax dollars and give them to private institutions, right? And the fear there is that it'll result in basically subsidizing, it'll be welfare for the wealthy who want to put their kids in private school or are doing it anyway, and will be subsidizing religious institutions and schools that don't allegedly meet the same qualifications as public schools. And of course the rejoinder to that is, my kid isn't being educated, I don't have the money to put my kid in private school, but this would allow me to do it. There's arguments both ways. My concern is that this will result in schools in wealthier areas becoming underfunded, where only poor kids will be going to those schools. I don't think that's the real consequence. I think the real consequence is we're going to see inner city urban schools that are already struggling get to the point where they're not economically feasible, and when they have parents that can't take them to the other school districts, or I mean to a private school, they're just going to be lost. But the flip side is, Quanell, we need to start expecting more from public schools. I think we do that. I think it's a simple fix, and I think Tellurico was being dishonest. Oh, we have all these options, because most parents don't. Is that we allow kids, instead of allowing to take them to private institutions, we allow kids to take their money to different school districts, right? Because you'll have a number of school districts in one area. And then instead of getting on a waiting list to get to a better elementary or a better junior high or a better high school, you're going to say, hey, I'm leaving the school district. Now, we'd have to have a much more robust busing program, but it would all keep it in the public sphere, and it would take failing school districts that are doing a horrible job, like the Houston Independent School District, that you just send your kids off to be just terrified or to not learn. They could take their money to higher performing ones like Katy or Friendswood or wherever, and we could see a drastic change in a force. But if you take it and you give it to private schools, I paid for private school long before I could afford it. But if you do that, I think we're going to bankrupt our public education system, and I think America's poor loses, and I think it's a bad idea.
Charles, the American poor are already losing because of the grotesque failures of the American public education system.
Okay.
We just said in the previous show that America spends more per student than any other civilized country on earth, but yet our academic ranking of our students have been on a consistent decline for 40 years. Charles, we have inner city schools where kids are graduating from high school only later to learn that they're functionally illiterate and can't read or write. That's a damn crime. That's a shame. We must do what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said we should do in 1994 in his book, Torchlight for America. Black people must take control of the educational systems within the black community. I believe that I support school choice. I support school vouchers. But don't take them vouchers to white communities and white neighborhoods. Let's pool our resources and let's make black academic institutions great schools of higher learning for black youth. Do you realize, Charles, that during segregation, young black boys were academically doing better during segregation, and most of the teachers back then were not even being paid. They were volunteers from the church. They were teaching for free out of love. We have too many teachers now in America's inner cities teaching children that they do not love. And black people have asked themselves the question, if for almost 500 years, if white people would not treat you right, why would they turn around and educate your children right to compete with theirs? They're not going to do that. They're already pulling out of schools Black History Month in white school districts. They're already taking out stories in books where they don't talk about slavery being slavery anymore. They call it involuntary workers. That's the new name for slavery in some of these school districts, because they say it makes white children feel bad. We as black people must begin to truly take a hard look in the mirror and see where our children have been failed by the public school system of America. If we can collectively come back together as we once did in the 40s, the 30s, the 50s, and 60s, and begin to control the academic growth and development of our children, we have a better chance of producing a better product. Then we ain't got to fight about can God's name be mentioned in school. We ain't got to fight about school prayer. We ain't got to fight about letting boys who are transgendered compete against girls in girls sports. We ain't got to fight about that. We can bring common sense back into the school system, back into the classrooms. And then let's do this. I would love to see a movement in this country to where we really raise the pay for teachers and try to bring more men into the classrooms, because a lot of women are dealing with some hard-headed boys, some of them straight up thugs, that are terrorizing the classroom and terrorizing the teachers. When I grew up, we had a Coach Elliott. We had a coach, Coach Morrow. We had Coach Booker. Man, we had some male teachers that wasn't playing no games.
Okay,
so we need that back in the school now, Charles.
So just to be clear, that you want segregation again, and
we still got it.
You are pushing the
Charles, we still got it.
lie that it is white educators that are failing black students. Let's look.
I said it's both. It's white educators as well as black families, because education starts in the home.
But
in the public school system, the education system is controlled by white state legislators.
If you go to where black, and it is African American students who are absolutely scoring and performing the lowest when they graduate high school, and many when they graduate college, because they are being failed. And a racist would just say, oh yeah, they don't have the ability, right? Which is absolutely not true, because if you look at the real numbers, every race is equally intelligent, right? So then you have to go, there are cultural differences, there are ethnic, there are all these differences, right?
But when you talk about it, hold
on, right?
It's an economic
but you talk
difference.
about how it's all white people, but you go to Baltimore, and you go to Detroit, you go to Atlanta, you go to Memphis, I just keep going on and on.
Arkansas,
with
Louisiana, right here in Houston.
That are run by African Americans, that are overwhelmingly dominated by African American staff, and yet are failing African American students. So you want to talk about it. You want to talk about it.
But who controls the curriculum? Who controls the payroll? White state legislative houses.
Let's see in New
white
York,
state legislators, like the one we saw on this video. This white state legislator was speaking about economic funding for public school systems.
Right, he was
yes, you got black teachers, you got black administrators in a black community, but they're not funded by black people, and the dollars are not determined and shaped where we want them to go. We need black funds directed by black people using our tax dollars to do it. They're never going to let us be free like that.
Baltimore and Detroit are in liberal-run states where you have an overrepresentation of African Americans based on the state population in state government, and this is just you lying again.
No,
right?
Charles.
We should not
I
look
can give you fine examples of black charter schools.
Look at this.
I can give you fine examples of black charter schools.
We should not be
ran by black people,
segregation
written by black people, attended by black students with exceptional test scores.
Apartheid.
Exceptional test scores.
What we should instead do.
Charles, academic apartheid has never ended in America, Charles. It never ended, brother.
Okay.
What I'm saying to you is we got to be, I said, take a long, hard look in the mirror. We as black people cannot look for a white school system to properly educate our children.
Good looking.
Education starts in the home first. We got to raise the highest standard in black homes about academic excellence, like we used to.
No doubt.
We used to be that way.
That all
in the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s, we had that attitude.
The selfishness. There's so many parents of all races that embrace selfishness, embrace a gangster culture.
And what has teacher unions done?
And what has teacher
unions done?
But
teachers unions have protected some very bad teachers. Who should not be allowed to teach in this public school system.
You're right
some
about
very bad teachers.
But I think segregation is a horrible idea. I think looking at things through the lens of race is a horrible idea.
America is still academically segregated.
No, it's not.
The majority of white kids don't go to school with black kids.
Okay.
The majority of black kids don't go to school with white kids.
Black school
it's still segregated,
controlled by black people, failing black students is still Still Whitey's
No,
fault.
we want to
Still
control the
Whitey's
funding
fault.
of it, and
let's
then
see-
let us
and
produce
let's
something.
See what happens when they control the funding. Let's talk about Detroit. What happens? Or
Oh,
let's talk about Atlanta.
we've
Or
never
let's
controlled
talk-
the funding.
Oh, okay. Yes, they
Those state legislators
Let's talk
have
about
been
right
white
here.
dominated,
In
controlled by
Houston,
liberals and white conservatives.
HISD, They control. They said, hey, let's take it all and give it to consultants who happen to be our friends
Crooks.
and administrators and all this, and
And
let's
many of them were
leave
absolute
black
crooks.
students behind. And you know what they were?
Charles,
They were African American adults
the
failing.
public school
It's
system
not about white
is
or
failing
black.
America,
it's
Charles.
about accountability for government employees.
But white people are not going to educate black children
Why
in the
not?
best of manner.
Why not?
Because you don't want our kids competing with yours.
Who's you?
Because you don't want our
Who's
kids
you?
competing with yours.
Just because you're a
If
racist
you won't treat us
doesn't
right,
mean
you're not
everyone
gonna
else
teach
is a
us right.
racist, right? You're spewing racist
Sir,
rhetoric.
if white people
co-
would never treat us right, they're not going to educate our
what are
kids
you
right.
talking about?
Because you never loved us.
Okay, who's you?
You white folks.
White folk generally?
Yes, you white folks.
You know, so when you talk about white folk
Yeah, white
generally,
folks like you in particular.
that's what's that word? That's racism.
No,
Quana.
that ain't racism.
I know you don't believe you can be
That's
racist.
that's my opinion and my statement without power.
Which is racist.
You want to know real racism?
Yeah, you're racist.
When white people write and implement the entire curriculum and then tell black children they got to pass it and be examined and graded on that curriculum. Now
Okay.
that's real racism.
Hey, how about
That's racist.
We just go
when
back
white people
to
determine
making kids
how the
pass
funds
tests.
are
I
dispersed
know.
in everybody's school system, including black
Quanell
neighborhoods.
wants a world where
That's
no
real
one has to
racist.
pass a test,
That's
and
racism.
then he wants to complain about it at the same time.
No, let us all implement the test, not just white folks write the test.
Yeah, that's not happening
Now,
in
see,
America.
I know it because you tell the truth just now. That ain't happening in America.
No, it's not. No, I'm saying.
Because see, you know,
what you're
you don't
saying
want
is
white
happening
kids have
is
to
not
pass the test
happening,
written by black
right?
people.
What you're talking about.
How many
is
white kids would underperform if we wrote the test for white students?
Okay, well, statistically.
Whoa.
you
I
wouldn't
know
say
what it would be.
No.
You ought to be failing like hell too.
But see, that's not the truth.
But that's
right?
what we do.
We
have to
better
pass the
education.
same test that only white folks implement, and we got to pass that test.
Okay, people
Which is
should
absolutely
pass
culturally
tests.
biased against black children.
This is exactly the problem. You're telling black people they can't instead of telling
I'm
black
saying
people
we should
they
not have
can
to.
and they
we
should.
should not have to. We should not have to pass the test put forth
Yeah,
by them
well,
and only them,
well,
with none of us
The
included
problem is
in the
Quanell
process.
never passed the test in his life.
That's it for the Face-Off on Fox Soul. We'll catch you next time.